I kind of hate to get up here. I was enjoying that. I could have just sat there and listened to him. That was awesome. Wow. I am really humbled and honored to be here. I've attended a lot of these things, and I have listened to a lot of really good speakers, and I really would never have imagined myself standing at this podium other than maybe to introduce somebody else, which I did, by the way, not too long ago. I introduced Nathan Meller, and kind of one of my bucket list items is I wanted there to be more people to hear me talk than him. I know that doesn't fit the characteristics that I was just described as having, but so we're going to count and we're going to see how that works out, and then if there aren't more, I'm not going to say anything about it, and if there are, I'm definitely going to talk about that a lot. So, well, I'm Thomas, and I am a recovering addict leader. And if any of you have ever been to a 12-step meeting, and I imagine a number of you have, that would be a recognizable way to open. And you would also recognize that the way we're taught to tell our stories in recovery is pretty simple. We talk about the way things were, we talk about what happened, and then we talk about the way things are now. And so that's kind of what we're going to do today. I'm going to tell you our story. If you're speaking someplace, it's a good idea, I have found, in the little bit of speaking I've done, to know a little bit about the organization you're addressing. That avoids some really awkward things that might happen if you were to say something inappropriate in a given room full of people. So I went to the website and I looked up OK Ethics on their website just to see what they were about. That was supposed to be funny, but off to a great start. The banner on the website says promoting integrity in the workplace. Have you all seen that? Have you all been to the website? You don't? Yeah. So I looked that up, looked up integrity, because I thought, okay, if they're going to promote integrity and that's what they want me to talk about, then we need to know what integrity is. And I got this definition. I'm just going to read it. The quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, and then also the state of being whole and undivided. So as we talk today, I want you to keep those two words in the back of your minds, or maybe in the front of your minds. Honest and undivided. All right, we're going to focus on those two words. And we often think about ethical behavior as, or in terms of not violating a particular standard or a generally accepted standard of behavior. We think about it in terms of our individual actions. And we refer to ethical cultures as those who promote or support or help people adhere to those standards. And that's great. I think that is a great idea, unless your standard is messed up. All right? That's where a problem exists. And so I want to tell you a little bit about my story. So when I was a young person, I'm not entirely sure how old I was, but I was younger than you would have imagined this happening. I was very interested in a lot of things. I like to build things and create things and take things apart and put them back together. And I read a lot. For the young people in the room, when I was a child and a young person, you actually had to go to this place called a library and check out books and actually read them, paper pages. That was the only way you could learn anything, because you couldn't look anything up on this thing called the internet. So I would go to the library, I would check out all the books on a topic, I would read everything that was published in the library and learn stuff. And then I would go attempt to do those things. And so I got really good at a few things because I always wanted to be an engineer from grade 1. So I liked things that were engineering related. And one of the hobbies I had was rockets, model rockets. Anybody here ever do the model rocket thing? And I loved model rockets because they combine several of my favorite things: fire, which also has the potential for an explosion, which is even better, and then, mechanics, the idea of flight and flight paths and the physics that are involved. And I learned how to calculate the flight path of the rocket, given the time that the engine would burn and the weight of the rocket, and a little bit of experimentation. I found that I could do all the calculations to figure out where a rocket was going to land. This became extremely important when I started arming the rockets that I was building and firing them into the field that was next to our house in the neighborhood that we lived in. Because as you can imagine, if my calculations were off and the rocket landed, like, say, on a neighbor's house, this was going to be a problem, right? So I thought I had all this down pat, and I built these rockets, and we won't go into the details of where a 10 or 11-year-old got explosives. Mom and Dad, we probably have to talk about that later. But I found often that in spite of all my calculations and all of my work, the rocket didn't land where I had intended it to land, which was distressing when they blew up in the wrong place. So being an engineer in training, I needed to get to the root cause of this. I needed to figure out what was going on. And so I backtracked, and through redoing my calculations and looking at all this stuff, what I figured out was the platform, the launch rod that I had to fire my rockets from was not stable. It was light, it was a little bit flimsy, because I don't think Estes Model Rocket Company intended for you to be launching explosive projectiles with their equipment, and so it didn't matter how accurate it was. But mine needed to be more accurate. My platform wasn't stable, and a slight deviation at the beginning of that rocket launch produced a fairly significant difference at the end of the rocket flight, enough that I was in danger of going to jail, which is another story for another time. So that's a key point I want us to remember as we go through this afternoon, that it's the beginning of our journey that sometimes causes the things far down the road that we're unaware of at the time. And often, in order to correct what has happened or what is happening, we have to go back a little bit farther than a lot of times that we tend to do. All right, so we're gonna talk about that. So let's talk about my beginning. Unfortunately, by the way, I didn't apply that particular lesson to a lot of other areas of my life. Caused a lot of other problems. But let's talk about the beginning. Let's talk about my launch pad. Now, you all know my father, but most of you probably don't know my grandfather, Garmin Kimmel. Founded Kimray in 1948, which was exactly 70 years ago this August. And he was a genius. He was a phenomenal man. Not without his flaws, but he was a wonderful man. And he was brilliant. He had the capability, the capacity. When I was very young, I would sit at the table with him, and he would explain to me very complex things in a way that I could understand them. And I never felt like I was being talked down to. He just had this way of relating to people when he was explaining ideas and concepts. Designed most of the products that are the staple of Kimray's business even to this day. Had 40 plus patents to his name, was very involved in the community, very involved in philanthropy, was just all these different things. Was an exceptional individual. Then my dad is a Marine, no longer active obviously, but is a Marine, served in Vietnam. Yeah. Everybody that's clapping obviously didn't grow up in a household with a Marine as your dad.
Turned out all right.
I learned to eat in 5 minutes. My dad's an exceptional individual also. Got out of the Marine Corps. Of course, by that time he already had a wife and 2 kids, so that's not an easy thing to do. Went to school, got an engineering degree in 3 years basically. Came to work for Garmin, his kind of second dad, and worked his way up in the company. And a lot of people don't know that at one time we had a medical device company. My dad was president of that. My dad invented the cardiac output computer, which isn't a thing anymore because technology's moved on. But at that point in time, it was an analog computer. I know that doesn't mean anything to a lot of people, but a very important piece of equipment. And Garmin and my father, along with doctors here in Oklahoma City, my dad and Garmin were part of pioneering open heart surgery. So involved in things that most of us only dream about being involved in. So this is the environment I grew up in, surrounded by these men who were exceptionally capable, achieved a lot of things. And here's the thing, I never saw my grandfather or my father afraid. I never saw them uncertain. I never saw them wrong. I'm not saying they weren't those things. Now that I'm older and we've had some talks, I know that those things were there, but I didn't see those things. All I saw was that they were really good at what they did, they were very successful, they were very smart, they were always right, they always had a solution. All you had to do was follow them and you would be fine. And so that's what I began to believe it meant to be a man and it meant to be a leader, was that you had to be right, you had to be certain of yourself, you had to have it all put together, and that showing emotion, being afraid, being uncertain, that was weakness. And then I translated that, with that as my launch pad, as my rocket began to fly, I translated that into a belief system. And my belief system goes a little like this. Value is generated from accomplishment. It's very simple. You're worth what you do. You're worth what you create. And that the things that are negatives, emotion, and that subtracts from your value. So the less emotional you are, the less times you're wrong, all of that, then the more valuable you are. And when I say it that way, when I just kind of say it out loud like that, that probably seems a little silly to you, but I would put to you that our society tells us that all the time, even right now. That in a million ways every day we get the message that we are worth in some way what we present to other people in terms of our accomplishment, whether we look the right way, smell the right way, drive the right car, have the right job, the more money you make. And we deal in society today with this entire issue of, we even classify people by socioeconomic status. We're much more likely to pay attention to someone who's wearing a suit than we are somebody who's dressed shabbily. We're much more willing to pay attention to somebody of certain races than we are others. I mean, we do this across the board in a million ways every day. So I don't really feel so bad about coming to that conclusion growing up. It was really pretty easy, right? So that was my belief system. What that led me to was a life. I got on this treadmill early in my life where, in order to be valuable and in order to be successful, because those were important to me, I needed to accomplish. And so I started accomplishing, and here's the problem. I was good at that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and a lot of you in this room are very accomplished people, but I'm type A, I'm firstborn, I'm driven, I'm obsessive compulsive, I'm a perfectionist. All of these are not good qualities, by the way. These are all my problems. And so initially, it worked. It worked because I was good at doing things. I learned fast. I made good grades. I built things. I won awards. In third grade, I won the science fair for my whole school. That was the kind of thing I did. And so for a while, that worked. I got a sense of accomplishment. I got my sense of value. But that became my addiction, and I just continued on that track. So let's fast forward a little bit. In all of that, I went to college. By the way, I know this will sound ironic, but I got thrown out of college twice, and it's not because I wasn't good at school. It was I was obsessed about something else other than school, and that was kind of a pattern in my life. Is that I was hyper good at whatever I was interested in, and I ignored a lot of other things, and that's not a very healthy way to live. And so fast forward, I've got a wife, I've got 6 kids, I'm working my way up in the company, and things are great. Kimray's a fantastic company. We're widely known for our culture and for our values and all these different things, and I was part of that, and that made me feel good because I got to take credit for that, and we got our names in the newspaper, and we got awards, and I got to be in front a lot, and we just kept going. But there were things that I wasn't getting that I wanted, and I thought, okay, the problem is money, because growing up, Kimray was a little bit smaller, and a smaller company, you don't have as much free cash, and so I thought to myself, hey, if we just make more money, then we can do these other things. We can have bigger offices, and we can buy cars, and we can do all this stuff, and so we grew Kimray. We made more money. That wasn't that difficult, and we just kept growing the company, and I kept getting the things I wanted, and here's the thing. What I was doing was I was feeding my needs. I was taking care of me. Now, catch this, I was taking care of other people too, and a lot of times I was even telling them that the decisions I was making were good for them. And they weren't bad for them necessarily, but they were better for me, right? So here's the thing, addicts are fundamentally selfish, all right? And we're gonna talk more about that. But I, as a leader, was not being honest, and I was not creating unity in the people that I was serving, the people I was leading. So I was not doing these things. was not honest, and we were divided. So here's the first kind of critical point I want to make, and it's about your culture in your organization. I get asked a lot to talk about culture. People say, how do we change our culture? I got bad news for you. You can't change the culture unless you change the belief system of the organization. And you can't change the belief system of the organization unless the leaders change their belief. Because this is how it works. The leader's belief produces or directly impacts the belief system in the organization, and that organically creates the culture in the organization. And you can write any words you want to on the wall in the front office, but you can figure out what the real belief system is in an organization by just going out in the organization and seeing how people are acting, how they're treating each other, how they treat their customers, how they treat the community, and you will learn very quickly what the organization actually believes. And a lot of organizations believe that people are valuable for what they produce and what they do for you. And when that's your belief system, it creates this competitive environment where people are competing with each other for value, which is something we desperately need. We need to be valued. And so we're competing with each other for that. In order for me to be more valuable, you have to be less valuable. There's a limited amount of value, and somebody's got to give up some if I'm going to get more. That's a horrible way to live. That's a toxic culture, and that's what we end up with. So, long story short, my father gets sick, leaves the company for a time. I step into leadership. I was unprepared to lead. I'd been around leadership my whole life. I thought I knew what I was doing. I was smart, I was capable, educated, even somewhat experienced, but I really had no idea what leadership was. And here I am running a company. And things went from not so great to really bad because I just kept doing the things I was doing to meet my needs. So let's talk about that addiction thing for a minute. That's a difficult word for a lot of people, and I'm kind of saying a lot of things that not everybody wants to hear. I've talked to a lot of leaders, and I have begun to notice that leaders often act like addicts. Even if they're not actual addicts, even if they don't have a substance abuse issue or even a direct addiction, a process addiction, they act like addicts because addiction, as I already told you, is fundamentally selfish. And so a leader that is fundamentally selfish is going to structure the environment around them to serve their needs, to make sure they get what they need. Power, position, prestige, your name in the paper, more money. You want people to take care of you. You don't want to be catered to. Those are things that when I say them out loud like that, everybody goes, I wouldn't do that. But just look at some of the organizations around you and see how people are behaving. That's what we'll see. So when I talk about an addict leader, I might actually be talking about somebody, because I've also found a lot of leaders that because they're high functioning and because they have the capacity and the capability, find themselves addicted to substances or other things. I see a lot of that. But I just see a lot of what looks to me like addictive behavior. And so an addict leader is someone who acts like an addict, whether they're an actual substance addict or not. Addiction manifests itself in at least 3 ways that are fairly easy to recognize if you start looking for them. One is a persistent craving. So if you have somebody that's a drug addict, they need that drug. And as their addiction progresses, the drug that made them feel good yesterday, that won't be enough today. So they need more, that persistence of craving and that continual increase of craving. If you have a person that's an addict leader, or if you're an addict leader or in danger of becoming one, you're finding yourself more and more that you need the recognition that comes along with leadership and the power that comes along with that in order to feel normal. A loss of control. Look in the paper on any given morning and you will read a story about a leader who on the surface looked fine yesterday, and then we find out this morning that there is something horrific in their background, right? There's something going on because the things that they were doing weren't enough to make them feel right, and that's the problem with addiction, is it just keeps grinding away at you, and so eventually they do something that they would never have imagined themselves doing. They embezzle money, or they abuse the people that are in their circle of leader, the people they're supposed to be serving, or the list is endless. We are very creative. Human beings are exceptionally creative. And when we have a need that's not getting filled, we find all kinds of ways to do that. So that loss of control. And then they continue to do things even when they know there are going to be negative consequences. If you think a drug addict doesn't understand that doing drugs is going to lead to bad things, you're wrong. They know that what they're doing is damaging. They just can't not do it. That's the nature of addiction. And so to say that an addict leader is unaware that the things that they're doing are going to have negative consequences is naive. They know. I knew that the stuff I was doing, was problematic. I just couldn't do it a different way. I didn't have the resources to do it a different way. And again, all this stuff that we're doing is losing its potency over time. It takes more and more and more of it. That's why it becomes a problem. So we began to experience more toxicity in our culture. Now, to the outside world, Kimray continued to look fine, because one of the wonderful things about having a company that's 70 years old is that you can't easily destroy it overnight. So our core values were intact. There were a lot of people in the company still attempting to do the right things for the right reason, in spite of me not leading them to do that. But over time, the shift in how I was leading led to a shift in our culture, and we began to experience things like siloing. You know what that is, where different departments kind of say, well, we're going to do our job, and they're the ones that are screwing up, not us, and everybody just kind of stays in their own little. And again, that's back to that competitive culture. We ended up with a culture internally, a culture of fear. So people were afraid to say what they thought. They were afraid to point out the things that were obvious to most people. They were afraid of me, quite frankly, and they should have been, because I had the power and I was not listening to the people that I should have been listening to, and that's a dangerous place for those people to be, right? So I created this culture around me where I was safe to continue doing what I wanted to do because nobody dared to say anything about it. I think all of you have experienced a culture like that at some point or not. If it hasn't been someplace you've worked, then you've seen that. And then that, of course, leads to I wasn't inclusive, right? So I had a vision. We talk about vision a lot, and we often think, well, an addict leader probably doesn't have a vision. I had a vision. I had a vision for what I wanted, right? I had my vision, and I was going to use the company to achieve my vision. But my vision wasn't going to be a very good deal for everybody else, and so I had to be really careful who I shared that with. In fact, I didn't share my vision with anybody. I created a vision for them that looked good for them, and let me keep working on my vision over here. Does that sound unified? You can answer. It's okay. No. Does that sound honest? No. So again, we're missing. There's no integrity here, right? No honesty. And that lack of shared vision is unbelievably damaging to an organization. In a little bit, I'm going to tell you how we reverse that, and you'll see the difference between when people are included and shared in what's going on in the organization and when they're excluded. And an addict leader, by definition, has to exclude most of the people from what's going on, because you can't let anybody close to you. You can't let anybody in. So we headed in this direction where the organization was fundamentally sucking the life out of people. And it's actually difficult for me to talk about this because I look back and I realize there are people who aren't at Kimray today. They left Kimray, or we fired them, and they won't ever experience the right way we should have been doing things. They left Kimray, knowing our name in the paper, we're a great company and a company of character, and we do character meetings, but what did they experience under my leadership? And that really makes me sad. That really hurts my heart. So again, if we want to change that culture, we have to change our leadership. Yeah, the leadership needs to change. And so we needed to change at Kimray. Things got bad enough that we needed to change at Kimray, change of leadership, and so Kimray changed leadership. And on May 25th, 2012, my father fired me. That was not highlighted to laugh at. That's not, whoever laughed, That's not the funny part of my story, I'm telling you. It was not funny. I can't even, it would be very difficult for me to paint a visceral enough picture for you of what that was like. So Friday morning, we get called into the office. Part of the board is there, and it's explained to me that due to my behaviors and my failure to lead, that I was being terminated. They didn't actually fire me right off the bat. They asked me to step down as president, and they asked me to step down off the board, and then they fired me later. And which I've played that game too, so I know how that works. And what I can tell you is that for my whole life, no matter how convoluted my behavior and all the things that were going on, I was always headed somewhere. It wasn't the right place, but I always had a vision for where I was going to get tomorrow. That was a necessary thing for me to know, what am I going to accomplish tomorrow? I've got to do something bigger and better tomorrow. And on that day, I could not see anything in the future. I had no idea where I was going to go next or what I was going to do. Like, everything just kind of stopped. And that's important for me, and sometimes that's important for other leadership or other addicts, because for an addict, often, almost always, for an addict to be able to change, it requires an intervention. And that was my intervention. Something has to get in our way because we're incapable of that. And so having all of that stripped away from me, everything that I had relied on for my identity was gone in 15 minutes. A 25-year career ended in 15 minutes. And so I really kind of didn't know what to do, and I went to see a counselor and spent a few hours in the counselor's office, and then the counselor called my wife, and she came, and we just kind of looked at each other, and I was in a pretty bad place, and so I went to get help. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, that morning was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it resulted in the best thing that ever happened to me, which is I had an opportunity to have other people help me figure out way back at the beginning how my launch pad had gotten screwed up, and help me figure out how to correct those belief systems so that I would have an opportunity to live an authentic life. Now, at that point, I don't know what that looks like, right? I don't know where I'm going, what I'm going to do for a living. I didn't think I'd ever go back to Kimray. But it's important to understand that the changes that need to happen in our lives as leaders, if we're headed in the wrong direction, are transformative, not tactical. Do you understand the difference? It's not a list of things you need to do. And when people ask me to talk about culture, they say, well, what do we need to do to change our culture? I can't give you a list of 7 things, because you don't need to change your tactics. You've actually got to transform yourself. You have to become different people as leaders. Susan is my greatest cheerleader up here. And the monarch butterfly is one of my favorite butterflies, mostly because he's orange and black, and which are the best 2 colors in the universe. A good speaker can work in their alma mater under any topic. So we need a transformation, and that often takes an outside influence. It often takes an outside intervention. And so one of the reason that I'm standing up here, the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing, is that maybe I can be that intervention in someone else's life before they get as far down the road as I got and have to blow everything up and destroy their lives before they figure out that they got to do things a different way. And then maybe those people that are in those organizations can experience that better way of life sooner and for longer in their careers. That's the only reason we're doing this. So now the fun part. So that was the bad part, right? Started off wrong, got all out of whack. I'm an addict. That's all there is to it. I'm in recovery. And then I get to come back to Kimray. Now, not every intervention and journey into recovery results in restoration, but without intervention and recovery, restoration certainly isn't possible. So that opens the door, an intervention and then our recovery as individuals and as organizations opens the door for restoration. And so now I get to tell the fun part. I get to tell what Kimray is like today. We have a different belief system today. I have a different belief system. The organization has a different belief system. And that belief system is really simple. Just like my wrong one was simple, the new one is simple too. People are intrinsically valuable.
Amen.
That's it. People are intrinsically valuable. They were valuable before they got educated. They were valuable before they created anything or did anything or acquired any skill sets. They're valuable no matter what their gender is, what their color is, what their background is, where they were born, where they grew up, how they speak. They're valuable no matter how much money they make or how little money they make. And we're all equally valuable. All right? The only equality I think we're ever going to find in the world is that we are all equally intrinsically valuable. And at Kimray, the way that we demonstrate that value to each other is through respect and dignity. And that word respect bothers some people. They say, well, I can't respect somebody who's got a different viewpoint than mine. I just can't, I'm not talking about admiration. I'm talking about respect for another human being in the way we treat them, in the way we interact with them, and the things we're willing to do because we're all part of a community together. So at Kimray, we're one big happy family, and we're the best kind of family because we got to pick each other. So, do you have a weird Uncle Bob in your family? I do. It's my dad's brother, actually. And my mother does not want to invite him to Christmas because he's bizarre, right? And it just makes the whole day weird. But my dad says, what, Dad? He's family. You got to invite him because he's family. And I get that. But at Kimray, we are a selected family. The people who work at Kimray picked us. We don't go out in a white van and grab people off the street and throw them in the back of the van. They come to Kimray and ask for a job, and then we pick them. We don't pick everybody. We're selected about who we pick. And since we've all chosen to be part of this family, we all agree to treat each other with respect and to act in ways that are deferential. It doesn't mean that I'm asking anybody to lay down their personal beliefs or to even change. I'm just asking them to be careful around the other people so that we don't offend or harm or hurt one another. And why would we not want to do that? Because we care about each other, because everybody's valuable, and because we respect each other equally. We do some silly things, and I'm going to run out of time. I could keep you here until 4 o'clock this afternoon, but we do some silly things at Kimray that help us remember that, and one of them is we call each other by our first names. And so when I walk around in the shop, the people on the shop floor call me Thomas. They find me at Walmart. As a matter of fact, I ran into one of our brand new employees.
Not Walmart. Uptown, Five Alive.
I'm sorry, Susan. I didn't mean to say that. I really didn't. I ran into one of our new team members. She's only been part of the company for about 3 months, and we had just had lunch. We try to have lunch with everybody in the whole team throughout the year. And she goes, Kimray. She remembered me, which is amazing, and I didn't remember her, which is what always happens to me. And so she reintroduced herself, but she called me Thomas. When she saw me, she said, Thomas. It sounds silly, but it matters because it breaks down that barrier. I am not superhuman. I'm not different than everybody else. I have different responsibilities, but I have no more or less value than anybody else in the organization. I have a slide that I want to show you real quick, and then we'll be done. People behave, people do things for just a handful of underlying motivations. You can compulse people to do things. You can compel people to do things. And a lot of people work under compulsion. They're compelled to work. They need a paycheck, and they put up with the environment that they're in, the toxicity, the drain, the lack of energy at the end of the day, and they go home and they have a glass of wine and hope they can get enough sleep and rejuvenate so that they can get up and do it again. And what is everybody living for? The weekend, right? We even have songs about them. They write country western songs about it. They're living for the weekend, right? And that's terrible, right? That's not the way to live. Now, another way we do things is by habit, and that's okay. We need some habits. That's not very productive. It's not using the front of your brain at all. The way we want our people to work, the way we want people to engage with one another is in passion. That's like when you're holding your granddaughter. That's passion. When you're going to the baseball game if you're a baseball fan, or you're going to the football game if you're a football fan, that's passion. The things that people do because they want to, and because they love them, and because they enjoy them. And when you're in a healthy culture and you can connect with the mission of the culture, which is important, Everybody knows what Kimray's mission is, because I think we just said it, to make a difference in the lives of the people that we serve. That's it. Our mission isn't to make vows. Our mission isn't to make money. It's to make a difference. And everybody at Kimray can plug into that mission. Everybody at Kimray can find a way that they're making a difference. But here's the most important part. Does any of that work if I, as a leader, am not living that and demonstrating that? You can. We all know the answer. You can answer. No, it doesn't make a difference, does it, if I don't do that? I would love each of you to have the chance to experience what it's like at Kimray, but I can't hire all of you. And unfortunately, I probably wouldn't. We are very picky, I told you. Most of the people at this table would not make the cut. I'm just telling you. But like taking somebody to your favorite restaurant, you can talk about it, but until they actually eat the food, they don't really know what it's like. So real quick, I want to show you a video that maybe will give you a little bit of taste of what it's like to be at Kimray, and then I'll make one closing remark, and we'll get you out of here by 1 o'clock.
So Wednesday morning, woke up, went to work. I was at work, and Kylie called me and said, the hospital just called me. They said they found an abnormality in the x-ray. They said it's some kind of lymphoma, and I didn't even know what lymphoma was. I didn't know it was cancer. And my wife was 8 months pregnant at the time of my diagnosis. And I started chemotherapy 2 weeks before my son's due date. Oliver was such a welcome distraction during that time, and we really needed that. Looking back on it, it was a huge blessing. In the moment, it really didn't seem like it, but once he was born, it was the best thing that could have happened at that time.
I'm so thankful that he worked at Kimray during that time. I mean, even now, I don't want Kyle working anywhere else but Kimray. Kimray still is supportive in every way, body, mind, soul, every aspect of who you are, Kimray is involved in, and not just your work life. They're involved in your family.
I think it's because strong families make a strong company. And that's really how Kimray is just a big family. Not only just co-workers in Kimray as a family, but actual family.
We had a good month where Kyle was going through surgeries, PET scan, and a lot of tests going on. And just even the Kimray chaplain, Bruce Bartow, he would meet us there at those places and come and sit with me while Kyle was in those scans, in those surgeries, and just pray with me and talk to me and help me. And I wasn't even an employee at that point. I was an employee's spouse. So it was really amazing to see how Kimray came through. And then there's also a Make a Difference Foundation with Kimray, and what that is Kimray employees can make their contributions to it for a certain cause. So if there is something an employee is going through, they can make their contributions to help out that employee. And so we did go through the Make a Difference Foundation, and it was able to pay off our medical bills. So it was really amazing, yeah.
I guess it'd be technically May of 2015. I've been cancer-free, so it'll be 2 years next month in remission for me. Whenever I started treatment, they said, hey, the chemotherapy is going to make it to where you can't have kids naturally. And that was really hard to find out because we both knew that we wanted a large family. So yeah, we had tried fertility treatments for a little over a year. Nothing was working. And then we decided to do foster care through DHS. And we got all signed up for that and approved. And then in late November, we got a call that said, we've got this little boy at the hospital. He was born 2 days ago. He needs a home. And we brought him home, and 3 days later, we found out we were pregnant, completely naturally on our own.
It is the shock of your life when you actually get pregnant. It was amazing. I kind of had felt like something was wrong that week. Like my body was off a little bit. I was like, we've just gone through a lot, we just brought home our foster son, a lot's going on. But Kyle's like, maybe something is going on, and so we took a test and we found out that morning. It was 3 mornings after he came, and it was very shocking. We actually stayed home that entire day because I didn't know what to do with myself. I was so in shock.
So that was kind of crazy. But we know that God wanted us to have Jack with us and get pregnant. So we're due in August 7th is when we're due, and it's a little girl, Piper is going to be her name. So we're really excited about that. I just know that this is a great place to work, and with the opportunities that Kimray's already given me and the many more that will come, down the road, I know I could be here forever. I can't see myself anywhere else.
I know that wasn't fair, was it? I've seen that video like 45 times. I still cry every time I see it. An ethical culture, that's what we're really here about, right? An ethical culture is a healthy, empowering culture. It's marked by honesty and unity throughout the organization, including the leadership. And it's served by leaders who will treat each other and everybody else in the organization as equals and recognize the intrinsic value that people have through respect and dignity in all aspects of their leadership, in their personal life and in their public life. I'm here to tell you this is not just a good idea. I believe that this is our sacred duty as leaders.
Amen.
Thank you all very much.